So, I have a taste there that wants things to be balanced. I want my paintings to have a flow and some way for the viewer to experience the painting. But I also know that I haven't been classically trained in design and composition. It's a weakness, and it's also a superpower. So I definitely spend time thinking about composition, but I try to think about it in terms of how does my viewer experience the painting? How am I moving through it?
Hey friends, I hope you've had a super good week. I have. We just got back from Italy, and some of you have followed me over on the Instagram and the Facebook. And I did post a quick little short about a sweet little spot that we found, but you're here not just to hear about me getting back to the United States from Italy, but you are here because you are searching for where is your next steps after doing an intro to watercolor class. And I think I'm going to have something special for you. This is Angela Fehr again with another interview with watercolorists. If you've come to this channel, you're wanting to know more about watercolor, and I'm super stoked to have my friend Angela, who is also a brand ambassador with Daniel Smith. She has an amazing YouTube channel. Don't go there just yet. We're going to ask her some really cool, engaging questions because you're still looking probably for an area of watercolor to kind of specialize in. And through these series of interviews that I've done, we've gotten to know different artists around the world and just what they do and how they've got there. So without any further ado, I'm super stoked to have Angela on. How are you, Angela?
Hi, Gabriel. I'm good. I'm happy to be here. This is it's always fun to sit down and talk with another artist.
So good. I know that people want to know just a little bit more about you and how you became an artist. Can you give us just an overview of what that looked like? Were you an artist right out of the womb and as a kid, or were you later in life? Like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, something you should know about me, Gabriel, is that I'm the world's largest overachiever. I have always wanted to do all the things. And I was thinking today about being 5 years old, and my grandma would let me sew on her treadle sewing machine. It had a foot pedal, and she would just let me use all her scraps, and they would comment, my grandma and my mom would comment on how fast I sewed. And I wanted to be better. And so always wanting to be better meant anything I was a little bit good at has meant that I've wanted to pursue it. And from childhood, art was something that my friends thought I liked. I thought I was a good artist. And so I pursued that. And I lived far from civilization for my high school years. My parents became missionaries, and we actually moved into a remote tribe in Papua New Guinea. I homeschooled, and so I was in this isolated place, and the thing I wanted to do was make art. And being in an isolated remote place meant I didn't have resources beyond, I think we had some childcraft encyclopedias that had little art tips, and I would try to order books from time to time. We didn't have the internet then, so it was frustrating to be far away from resources to help me be a better artist. And I determined that when I graduated from high school and moved back to Canada, I would take art classes. And I took the first classes that were available when that happened. This was back in the mid-90s. And the first class that was available was watercolor. So I kind of started there. And I'm so glad that I did, because I love watercolor so much. The qualities that it has, that translucency, the flow, the beautiful mix of colors that you get that you can't do on your own. It happens like magic. Those are things that really engage me. And I've had to go through this process of learning how to be a better artist by not being such an overachiever. That's been a process. And that's been the art journey. But finding watercolor at that young age of, I was about 18, means that I've now been painting for 28 years. And so I have a few techniques under my belt and the brush miles to back them up. And that's helped a lot.
That's so good. Did you go to art school or did you go to workshops and learn? What did it look like for you after 18?
Well, I talk about living in a remote area in high school, but I still live in a remote area. I live here in northern British Columbia. We're about 14 hours north of Vancouver, so just drive north and don't stop for a long time. And so we're in a rural farming community. We're far from the city. There's not a ton of resources out here for artists. I had a local teacher teaching watercolor. A few years later, I was able to take another weekend workshop, and it was all piecemeal here and there. So I've done, but I think, so I never did make it to art school. I got married young and started raising babies and painting in my spare time. I think for watercolor, because the technique, learning how to anticipate what it does, and being able to kind of work with what's happening, because that's such a process of getting to know watercolor. I think every watercolor artist really has to be self-taught, even if you're going to art school.
That's so good. I love hearing this journey of how your art took off because as millennials are out there wanting to become these pro artists and everything, and I'll have to just say I'm a fan of your YouTube channel, and I'm sure people that are watching this are already watching your channel, and if not, I'll put the link down here in the bottom. They can find you. Don't go there yet because we're gonna keep talking. But Angela, could you tell us the importance of materials?
Yeah, again, you work with what you have, but you always want to. I think I definitely noticed that there are certain products that feel more intuitive to me. That you kind of fall into, this is my happy place. Today I was working with just a little warm-up painting this morning, and I tend to deliberately choose a lot of colors that separate and granulate and create texture. Daniel Smith has their Primatech line, which does that a lot, and some of their combined pigments like Moon Glow, of course, they're just kind of magical as they flow. So that's something that I've definitely noticed, that I feel more like an artist when I'm using pigments that let me play like that. And of course, as a watercolor artist, I think it's almost universal that watercolor artists always stress great paper. And I'm a big advocate for that. Having been a broke student artist, I know it's hard to invest in those good supplies. And I'm so thankful for mentors who would loan me paper when they saw me struggling away on the cheap stuff. Loan, give. And I definitely have noticed that we can make painting a lot harder for ourselves when we don't value what we do enough to invest in good materials. Watercolor is actually not an expensive pursuit. The paint tends to last a long time if you use it the way I do anyhow. And the brushes last a long time. So, the thing we're running back and forth to the store for is paper. And paper has two sides, and I figure if your painting's not turning out, that's full permission to throw paint at it until it teaches you something. So, we get the most mileage that we can out of our products.
That's so good. And a little thread that I'm hearing is sometimes watercolor can be a little difficult, but I'm also hearing this beautiful thing about experimentation and how watercolor can be rewarding. Can you tell us a little bit of that contrast?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think we get scared off by the things we hear about watercolor being the most difficult medium. I know I was told you can't fix mistakes in watercolor, and then of course you're terrified of making a mistake because you're stuck. But there is this amazing rewarding quality about investing in. I mean, all the things that we value the most are things that were hard to come by. So there is that sense of just keep showing up. And I think the idea that watercolor is the most difficult medium, there's also a flip side to every hard thing that we hear. So yes, it's the most difficult medium, maybe in developing those techniques. But it's also totally achievable, because if you are persistent enough to keep showing up, you will naturally develop the muscle memory and the observation skills to notice what watercolor is doing and be able to respond to that. And because it isn't easy, because there is that learning curve, things that are hard won are valuable. So, there is that flip side. And the same with not being able to fix mistakes. What if mistakes, maybe you can't just erase what you've just done, but maybe you can learn to accommodate it and pivot in this new direction that brings something better than you could have imagined on your own. And I find so often that when I let go of control, what I'm able to paint just has that much more beauty because it wasn't all fully formed in my brain. So yeah, there's some really, I think with anytime there's something, a limiting belief that's holding you back, putting a boundary in place, if I can look at the flip side of that and see it from another angle, maybe there's a blessing there as well.
I love hearing these words that you're saying that speak of discovery. When you're talking about pivoting, you might have accidentally got like a little bit of this color here when you really didn't plan it. But then you find out, oh, that's going to lighten up maybe just a little bit, right? And so I love this. Where do you see, and are certain things in art that you might want to have some time to develop in? What would you say those are?
Definitely something that I feel like I'm going to be working on for the rest of my life is this idea of composition and creating a strong composition. And yet I also rebel against that a little bit. And I don't know if I should even go there, but I know that because I'm a self-taught artist, I get to trust my innate good taste. So, I have a taste there that wants things to be balanced. I want my paintings to have a flow and some way for the viewer to experience the painting. But I also know that I haven't been classically trained in design and composition. It's a weakness and it's also a superpower. So I definitely spend time thinking about composition, but I try to think about it in terms of how does my viewer experience the painting? How am I moving through the painting? And so I don't always have the technical terms, but it's a training process, learning how to see. And then sometimes I rebel against that and think, you know what, I'm not going to worry about composition. This painting feels right. Whether or not the composition works is almost secondary. So I don't know. It's been an interesting process to figure that out. But it is something I think about a lot is just that idea of trying to have perspective on what someone else might see in my work while also wanting it to be very fulfilling and satisfying for me.
Yeah, it's so true. Like if you know who your buyer is or your viewer, when you're creating these paintings, like you're gonna win some, not just some likes or some yay great painting. Like you might actually get some people wanting to buy your work. And if we can spend some time in creating some really nice compositions. I remember when I was a kid, we were sitting at the dentist's office, and I tore this out of the magazine, but there was this plate of food, and you could tell there was a piece of pie because there was a napkin that was wadded up off to the side, and there was a fork on the plate pointing to the coffee cup, and the handle was pointing over here to the newspaper, and then there was someone on the newspaper pointing back at what had just got ate, and I was like, oh my gosh, like they've got me just like playing a game of pachinko where the ball's coming down. I'm watching everywhere it's going to hit before it's my turn to engage. And that's where we get to be as a good editor. Just like reading a book, before I even pick up a book, that cover of the book gets me to open it. So I totally agree. Could you tell us, some people are a little confused. Is there a difference between demoing art versus your own personal paintings?
Yeah, I think so. I think because I teach pretty much full time, I'm teaching for students, and so then I'm often thinking about what do I want my student to experience. And there's two phases there, because I often will teach beginner courses where a student is walking through the process of building a painting, and so there are principles that need to be demonstrated. In my own personal art practice, that I have a little dance between structure and freedom, and I need to do that. Structure can feel like safety, like a safety net, and it can result in a lot of control. That's that overachieving side of me. And then I'm also really wanting identity to be a big part of my work. So stepping aside of what are other people going to see or want from my art, and making this a space that's just for me. And really, I want my personal art practice to be founded on that. And so often the paintings that I'm most satisfied in, I'm a little scared to show people, because they don't necessarily tick all the boxes in terms of what criteria you might think of as a strong painting. I don't know how to, they don't always show all of the skill, my 28 years of skill as an artist. I almost want a painting that does that where I do less and the painting itself says more. And so there's this kind of place of vulnerability, and it's a fight to get there. And it's very hard to do that while you're teaching and recording video for classes. So I have to make that time for myself to get alone with my work and step out of my comfort zone again and find out who I am when I'm not just trying to achieve everything.
That's so good. Can you expound? You were saying something there is beautiful. Was when you do a painting that you allow some kind of freedom to happen. Can you expound on that? Even maybe can you give us more of a picture of what that looks like?
Yeah. Well, there's an artist that I follow, Nancy Hillis. She wrote a book called The Artist's Journey. I think that's what it's called. It's around here somewhere. And she talks about this idea of the adjacent possible, that every brushstroke that you place, it changes your painting. And all of a sudden there's new possibilities that emerge. And she's an abstract painter, so this really happens in abstract painting. When you're painting more representationally, you kind of still want it to turn out to look like the reference photo or the, whatever you're looking at. But at the same time, sometimes something will start to happen. I've been painting this tree lately, and there's this little rock at the base of the tree that I didn't think was very important, but the more I paint that tree, the more the rock seems to be important to me. And I've allowed myself to make that an important part of the painting. And I love this idea that I make a brush stroke, and then I get to know the painting with that new piece of the puzzle added. And then open myself up to the fact that maybe the painting's taking a direction I didn't anticipate. And that kind of openness, I mean, it's a life metaphor because things are always happening that we don't get to control. And then we do have to decide what we're going to do with, that new piece of information or that interruption in our day, and how do we respond, and do we make beauty and art out of it, or do we try to fight back the reins and keep control? So that life metaphor is one reason I want to paint this way, that I can trust that I dropped the brush and I made that huge, hideous mark, and maybe there's something beautiful that could come out of that.
I love that. I love that, because I get constantly students going, how do I fix this? And I was like, why do you feel that you need to fix something? Let's just turn off that critical brain, and let's see where we go from here. And then later it lightened up, and it actually put this beautiful starburst behind something that was backlit. She's like, oh my gosh. And I was like, see, it's not always the wins I learned from. It's the allowing it to just blossom and beauty within its own dynamics of where it's hard to explain to someone to let watercolor do its thing. and because we're dealing with evaporation, we're dealing with gravity, and so if
Mhm.
you have good paper, if you have some good paints,
Mhm.
and I'm sure there are people watching right now that are like millennials and they want to know how you became, how awesome you are with your YouTube channel. And I remember a YouTube channel that you did that was super rad, where you were like, hey, Daniel Smith, if you're watching this,
Yeah.
make me a brand ambassador.
Oh, and
I
I'm so,
use your paint. I love that, just like
yeah.
that taking the reins, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
Um, can you tell us, where was,
Mhm.
obviously you had some momentum going really well with your
Yeah.
YouTube channel. You have some subscribers, and can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's actually, it's hard. It's not easy to have an online business. But if you have, I mean, I think what we get to do though, as artists in career, is take your skill set, whatever it is, and you make your own career. I don't think that there's artists don't get the advantage of that 5-year plan where you show up, you do the steps, and then you end up with this career path, this trajectory. I think where you might, I don't know if I'm thinking about a corporate model or something where people do experience that, but we don't in art. You have to figure out what your career is going to look like and make that happen. And so it is a process. And I didn't know that when I was learning to paint. I always thought I would be kind of a hobbyist. I wanted to treat my art like a business. I wanted to think of myself as a career artist, but I didn't anticipate, it actually making an income for my family. And it's really blessed us incredibly. But that wasn't my expectation. And there was a time when a lot of my income came from all these diverse, different little artistic kind of things. I was writing articles, I was doing photography for a local business and writing their newsletter. I was learning how to use social media. And all of those little pieces did come together to give me the skill set to have this, to be able to do this as a business. But I read a quote somewhere that said success comes from the things you do consistently, and it is small pieces. And so it really comes from being stubborn. I think too stubborn to just stop. And I think most of us identify as stubborn at least a little bit. So, you can choose to be stubborn. You can't choose to necessarily, bring success as an artist, but you can choose to just keep plugging away and trying new things. And so, doing YouTube, I used to talk about kind of stumbling into it, like, oh, I just started recording videos while my kids were napping, and then I happened to put them on YouTube. But I actually saw one of my very first videos the other day. I rewatched it, and I said on the video, I'm like, this is something I want to do as a business. And so I'm being intentional that I'm going to do this. And I didn't even remember thinking that, but it was there, that seed was there, and I just plugged away at those little goals. And I remember telling my husband, I said, I really would like to be more intentional than just having random YouTube videos that people stumble across. I'd like to have a course, but I don't know if I should do it. I didn't even know what to Google to find like a course hosting platform. I didn't know what phrase to type into the computer because nobody was doing that at the time. And my husband was like, well, you're a stay-at-home mom. I mean, your time isn't monetized right now, so you might as well take the risk and try to build a course. And I've tried very hard to market in a way that I would like to be marketed to, not to just jump on the bandwagon of whatever the trendy, course launch funnel social media campaigns are supposed to look like. But I've always just tried to be true to who I am as an artist. And I have not waited to be asked. And I think that's the other thing you want to do as an artist is sometimes you have to be bold enough to show up, show up humbly, but show up and do like, no, I one of my goals was that I wanted to teach travel workshops, and no one was inviting me to travel and teach for them. So I thought, well, I live 5 hours away from this beautiful national park here in Canada. Why don't I try to organize and host something in Jasper? So I did that, and I had people, half of my students for that workshop came from the US. I had one from Belgium, and it was that confirmation, I can do this. And when that first invitation to teach internationally did come, you know, that was validation, but it was something that I had already done, you know, more than once. And so, yeah, I didn't have to wait. And and even with the Daniel Smith thing, I mean, I'm kind of embarrassed about that, because I don't like advocating in that way, asking for help, asking someone to support me. That's very out of my comfort zone. But it was kind of fun to think, can I do this in a playful way and ask to be invited? And so, you know, I tried it, and Daniel Smith has been very generous with me, and it's been fun to be a part of sharing. It was a product I was already sharing and excited about. So it's fun to be kind of acknowledged that way, and have my own dot card and my favorite colors that I use and so forth. So, yeah.
That's so good. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I know there's so much value in what you said that you might have to watch that over and over a couple of times to catch. She shared in such a nutshell of what I'm sure it took a good amount of time to do, you know, especially when you're dealing with little babies that need to go down for a nap, and you want to be a good steward over your time. And you know, you've got, I'm a daddy too, and I know what it means to get kids to roller skate practice on time, and to school and back. And so I know there's so much of your life we're not hearing right now, but I can hear in you're just passionate about watercolor. For some of those that you know, are hoping that they can make a career, and I think that you just gave them hope that, you know, they can put some faith into, if I keep pouring in you know, seeds into this thing, it's gonna be good. And there is a trend thing that's saying right now that video content is will outlast the pandemic. You know, we're all just sitting stuck in our house, you know, watching stuff. You know, I'm watching stuff all the time when I shouldn't be watching stuff. And I think you're very engaging as an instructor. What though, just back to your personal art, if we were kind of like to pinhole you in a type of genre of art, what would you say your own personal art is?
I'm not, again, self-taught. I'm not good at like finding that movement that I fit into. I don't know. I really am trying to kind of, I don't know if it's, I'm really into landscape right now, and finding my identity through landscape. So abstracting the landscape is a big part of what I do. I like being able to paint a landscape that feels almost universal in a lot of ways. You know, it's not somebody saying, oh, this, I recognize that landmark, but maybe there's an element of nostalgia, or even just like metaphor, trees. I paint a lot of trees as a landscape painter, and a tree is symbolic. You know, it grows where it's planted, and it uses what it's given, and there's something there that's meaningful to me. So trees remind me to look up. You know, they're reaching for the sky, and so you can take it in all these directions. And sharing your heart through the landscape, this is what it felt like to be here. That's exciting to me.
That's so good. And I'm gonna put down in the description your demo that you did with Daniel Smith, and people asked you some wonderful questions. And what would you say is, kind of as a teacher, for some of those that have been watching and they're not beginners, and they're considering teaching, what are some like trending, and I say trending because there are things that people would like to learn how to paint. What are some subjects that people that you've seen that they'd like to learn to paint?
I think, well, for me, I think painting, teaching comes best when I am painting things I really care about. So, paint what gets you excited, and trust that others are going to connect with that there's a place for what you make. For me, landscape is something I'm passionate about. I get a lot of requests to teach abstract painting. And, you can't just show up and say, here's an abstract lesson, paint anything you want. There are principles and prompts, I like to say, that can start off a painting and move you in that abstracted direction. So that's something I do get a lot of requests for, and there's not a lot out there for abstracts in watercolor, actually. So that's I think a niche that needs to be tapped still a little bit more. And just really share your why. Why are you passionate about this subject? I think one reason that my YouTube channel has been memorable is that I try to always share kind of my heart message. It's not ever just, here's how you do this step by step. And people connect with that, with the heart that comes through it. And it makes it more than just a tutorial on how to do something.
Thank you so much for talking about being genuine. And I mean, I live close to LA, and it's not very heartfelt at times. Here in San Diego, we have a lot of people that care about the arts. We're not known like New York as artists, but I think that doesn't matter. What we've heard this whole entire time is it doesn't matter where you live. I was actually born in a little dinky little town that didn't have more than 1,200 people in it. And well, now they have 1,200 people. Back then they didn't have 1,200 people. But it doesn't, you have made yourself a global, you have a lot of followers. You are a global sensation, that you are also with a company that is globally known, Daniel Smith. Their paint is around the world. Would you say watercolor is accessible?
I think so. I think that's something I'm very passionate about, and I think we can make it accessible when we are expansive in the way we share it. That authenticity is a big part of that. And watercolor was accessible to me as someone who felt like she had very few resources. And watercolor has connected me in relationship with all kinds of people, getting to know people like you and other artists all over the world. And I still get a little surprised when people seem to respect what I do, because I look where I live and I look what I've come from, and the lack of credentials that I feel like I have, or the lack of education. And at the end of the day, that none of that matters. Not nearly so much as the relationships you build. And I think just sharing of who you are with, I think that's what this has come out of. And I love that there's this family of artists out there, this community of artists that cares about making watercolor accessible.
So true. And another really thing, I think that people would love to hear is how you collaborate. One of my favorite things that you collaborated with was this. You guys talk about, not wait until you ask, but this whole cool hashtag artist mistake or something. Oh, I think I just ruined it. But you got together and collabed with other YouTubers that work not just in watercolor, but in other things. And you say, hey, these are mistakes that artists are making. And it was a very kind way. It wasn't arrogant whatsoever. But y'all made this hashtag. Can you talk about collaborating with other artists?
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to think, that was a few years ago. I love the, it's really hard to be relational actually with art, because if I'm teaching and you're teaching, then whose course are we promoting and so forth. But but at the same time, believing that the world is big enough for us to be able to work together. And just the more passion we can create for this medium, then there's a piece of the pie for everybody. And I would love to do that more, collaborate with other artists on YouTube and do some of these video hops and so forth, where everyone's kind of working the same topic. I've got some ideas. I just haven't had the time to put them together and organize everyone yet. But I think we do have a network of artists who and so much diversity. And my art has grown through being a part of other or seeing other artists' work and inviting that into my palette. And so I think we really benefit when we work together.
And I feel we can attract those peoples. We can invite those like-minded peoples. You might be in a small city or an area. I lived in this little dinky town one time in Idaho, and there were some negative artists around. And but there were the other people that were like-minded, that they had a higher power, that they knew that there was enough pie to go around for everybody. So
Yeah.
if you're that person that is hoping for that, you will bring that into your area.
Yeah, and I've predominantly seen that most artists are very inclusive that way. I think most of the time. It's been very seldom where I've really felt like, okay, here's a person who feels safe by making sure everyone's following the rules and, in their little corners. But, most of the time what I've experienced is this real sense of family and support. We know how hard this business is. And so, we want to, and that should make us more generous rather than less. And I really try to be that way myself. If someone's like, I don't have a book written. So if someone's asking me for book recommendations, I want to let everybody know, don't wait for me to write a book. Just here's some ones that I love, and if your style is realistic and you want to grow as an artist, well, I can point you to an artist who teaches that way. So, let's really be collaborative and generous that way.
That's actually a really good, that is probably a big business tip. Whenever I didn't have the product in my barber shop when I used to be a barber, I'd tell them where they could go buy it. And then when I did finally have it in my shop, they were coming and buying more than one.
Yeah.
And so that's just a really good golden rule tip, really. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I know if there's some people that are still watching, they're waiting for maybe they haven't been painting for a while and they're looking for that spark. What would you say to someone that maybe they've had a tragic thing or something going on how would you encourage that person to paint again?
Yeah, well, I think creativity is not very efficient and it's not very productive. And, I mentioned at the beginning that I'm an overachieving artist, and that does not mean I do my best work when I'm just trying to do all the things. Allowing space to process feelings and to get out of the studio and look around. I think about Mary Oliver. She wrote those beautiful poems about nature, and she could not have done that if she had chained herself to her desk to write poetry. Her poetry came out of her downtime when she wasn't doing the work, but she was using her eyes to look around and her heart to process what she was seeing. And so I really try to encourage my artists to give yourself a lot of grace for whatever you're going through. Recognize that there are seasons, and allow yourself space to be in whatever season you're in. Trust that if you don't have an urge to create, if you're good to your heart, you will get back to that place again. Sometimes it's a symptom if your art practice is not healthy, that not wanting to paint can be a symptom of, or just a sign that you aren't creating a gracious process that gives you space to be the artist you are right now. And so, you can work on that. You can learn how to be gentler with yourself in the studio. And sometimes you just need that breathing room to feel your feelings and heal, and then come back to the studio. I think we put a lot of pressure on art when we insist it has to heal us now. So yeah, it is good for our mental health, but we can bring unhealthy traits into the studio.
It's so true. I had a friend that got burned out that she was doing a lot of propaganda art and a lot of political stuff that was going on with the governments and whatnot. And then she just all that negative energy in her studio. Then she just decided to just do a nice big sweep of that, even got rid of all those paintings, and then she started painting these beautiful flowers and fruit now. And people are like, "What happened?" And she's just like, I was bringing in stuff into my studio that did not belong there. God didn't put me to be like this, like, let's dwell more in the mud. Let's paint these beautiful things. And I think one thing people can really take from your work is this excitement to explore. People sometimes may look around and go, okay, I only have a couple of acrylics, a couple of watercolors, I have a couple of little brushes. I'm gonna be an abstract painter and I don't need to know anything about composition. I'm just gonna throw some stuff there and then maybe put a couple more layers, and they're like 40 layers down the road, they're like, okay, let's just burn this canvas. What would you say to somebody that just heard, maybe I should do abstract, and we talked about composition, the importance of composition. How would we bring that?
Yeah, well, I think for an abstract to work, it has to be very authentic. It has to have an emotional connection. I think we bring an energy to our work and we cannot discount that. I talk about watercolor being transparent. We all know it is. And I think it's so transparent that our feelings show up on our paper. And so I need to guard what's coming out of my heart, I think. And there are times when I try to play it safe by being a wild, reckless painter without really putting a lot of thought into it. That doesn't work. There's this vulnerability, we have to fight for it. And so I can tell, I think we all can tell when an artist kind of just showed up and phoned it in, and either stayed safe and in their controlled, safe little comfort zone, or pretended they didn't care and were reckless so that they didn't have to worry about implementing to a high degree of skill or competency. I always want to do the best work I'm capable of. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to look technically amazing, and I think that's such an interesting tension.
Yeah, it's so true. I had a friend come up to me and she's like, I'm doing paintings up on stage for my church while the music is playing, but I only have 12 minutes to play or to paint because they're up there, and I'm enjoying the music, getting into the music, and next thing I know, they're already done with the 3 songs, and I have this thing and I said, you just got to learn how to plan. You have something that's in your mind, and you might have to kind of rehearse and play it. I mean, the band gets together and rehearses the song and plans, hey, do these little drums here first, and then I'll come in with the keyboard here, and that's where you're going to go like, hey, what songs are you going to play? Maybe you have a word or, and so I think what you just shared is amazing. We could keep going, but I think we're going to have to do this another time because I have so many great questions. Where can people find you? And I'm going to put all that stuff down in the description.
Yes. So my website is angelafehr.com. Everything is really there. I'm Angel Fehr on Instagram. And you can track me down on Facebook as well. So those are the primary places I show up. I do have my YouTube channel as well, and my handle there is Angel Fehr. But I think a search for Angela Fehr will probably bring up a couple hundred videos or so. So just go ahead and do that.
So good. So good. Thank you so much, Angela.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate you. And I will see you guys in the next video. Take care and have a good one. See you.
Bye, everyone.
Oh my gosh, wasn't that a super good interview? Angela took us from her wonderful story of creating art in her life to being a mother, running a YouTube channel, and much, much more. I think Angela, if you haven't been to her YouTube channel, go ahead and check out the link down in the description. If you haven't seen her wonderful demo with Daniel Smith, that'll also be down in the link. And go and check out what she has to offer you. And if this is a style that you'd like to explore, maybe you haven't quite found your niche yet and where you want to paint. And you don't have to find a niche. You can try her style and try some other things too. So I hope this was very helpful. If this was helpful, go ahead and pound that like button. Go ahead and smash that share button. And this isn't just for you to hold to yourself. Share it with the world so that other people can grow in their watercolor adventure too. You never know what happens when you share. It gets pretty magical, especially around watercolor. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this. I will see you next week as we get to interview another wonderful professional watercolor artist. See you soon. Take care. Bye.